Welcome to the Tiny House Ideas podcast. On today's episode of the Tiny House Ideas podcast, episode 7, I'm joined by one of the partners from Tiny Heirloom in America. So I'll be having a chat with Jeremy Killian, one of the partners at Tiny Heirloom. We'll be discussing tips for you guys if you're looking to go tiny. We'll be discussing what happens behind the scenes at a tiny house building company and giving you an insight into what really does go into those tiny homes. And we'll also have a chat about the HGTV program Tiny Luxury that Tiny Heirloom were featured on. So yeah, for an insight into what goes on at a tiny house building company and to give you guys an insight onto what really goes into the tiny houses, then do stay tuned to listen to me and Jeremy's chat. Welcome to the Tiny House Ideas podcast, the show where we talk about how to live a more fulfilling life with less. My name's Harry Alvarez Garman, and I've got tons of exciting guests lined up for you, including authors, entrepreneurs, and tiny house owners. If you love minimalism, sustainable living, personal development, and everything in between, then you're in the right place. On the show, we'll be talking about how you can do more of what you love, how to turn your passion into a career, and how to live more sustainably.
So I'm Jeremy Killian. I am the CEO and half partner of Tiny Heirloom. Tiny Heirloom was founded in 2014. And as many of you guys know, it was on the HGTV show Tiny Luxury for 4 seasons. A little bit different face because people know the original owners as Tyson, Zach, and Jason. And in 2019 of March, I actually ended up taking over the company and buying it and then merging our company, Tiny Innovations, with Tiny Heirloom.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. So sort of like a brief background into what you guys do. So when sort of with the original founders, when was Tiny Heirloom first founded then?
So Heirloom was first founded in 2014. They actually were out of their backyard, believe it or not, just like how most builders start. And the guys were in a position that they were building with their father-in-law. And it was kind of where the boom was starting with the tiny home, a whole realm of what is tiny homes. And they got in at the right time and they built a pretty cool looking house, put it out there, and it kind of just spread like wildfire. And the next thing they know, they've got people knocking at their door saying, do you want to potentially go on television? And so I guess the rest is history. Tiny Innovations started in 2016. I was a home builder for almost 15 years with my partner, Ryan, and he's my cousin, my best friend. And long story short of that is about end of 2015, we realized that we wanted to build, we wanted to do design because we loved it, but we needed to understand that just relying on one market and being in the Portland market was really dangerous as a smaller builder. And if you're not a big builder, it can become, one of those up and down waves. And so for us, we wanted to ultimately have security. We wanted to be able to do what we do, but do it basically nationwide, worldwide, however. And that's how we started Tiny Innovations. And so that's kind of how it all started.
So what would you say if you're sort of taking me from a project through from the beginning, sort of through to the delivery, the main differences between the custom and the production homes? Would you sort of say, obviously, it's got a lot to do with the design and the speed of build, but if you were to run me through a project, say I was going to be looking at buying a custom home from you, would you just mind running me through the process of that?
Yeah, if someone goes in and they decide they're going to go production, basically what happens is they work with our sales manager, Brian, or my executive assistant, Margot. And what will happen is they will usually fill out what's called a design questionnaire. That questionnaire is really important. A lot of people sometimes wonder why we have those. And the reason we have those is we don't want to have to read your mind and then definitely not have the customer satisfaction there. And so when you're putting that information in there, I like this. It smells like this. It tastes like this. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
It comes down to what your needs and wants are and then what you're looking for. And then that helps someone like Brian, who's been doing this for a very, very long time. And he sees, okay, they like these different types of variations, these types of builders, these models they've seen on TV from, our show or other shows. And then it allows him to really get into the nitty gritty. Once we do the consultation, we then put it in what's called a proposal form. And the proposal form is an online form that we produce, and it breaks down everything from the length of the trailer to the width of the trailer, what you're getting with the trailer, all your add-ons, your extras, discounting, shipping, the whole 9 yards. And then it has your total, price. And then from there, If the client decides they want to go back to the drawing board to save some money, or they want to add some stuff because it's below their budget and they want to put more into it, then they go to kind of like a round 2 with Brian. After we get that figured out and they sign off on the proposal, what then happens is we go into the design phase and into contract. And what we'll do is we'll set a contract at the next price typically. And then I always let the customers know you've got about a 2 to 3 week window in the design phase where they'll work with our architect. And we have an in-house licensed and bonded architect that works for us. Her name is Katie, and she's phenomenal at what she does. She basically makes it come to life. She does all the animation, she does the floor plans, everything. And so she walks the customers through A to Z. She works on all the selection choices to make sure that at the end of the day, the customer is satisfied and they get what they want. Once they sign off on that, then we do either a modification to the contract and do a change in terms if it's applicable, whether it's a credit or a debit or both, it doesn't matter. Or we leave it as is if it doesn't change and it's in the budget that they had. And then we go to the trailer ordering process. We'll order the trailer. We use Summit Manufacturing. They're probably one of the best trailer makers in the country. They custom make all their trailers to our specifications and what we require.
Wow, okay.
That way that we don't have to guess. We know all of our tolerances. We know everything. We know our weight load distributions, our calculations, everything. Before we finalize all of it, though, it goes to engineering. So I use a third-party source. The reason I do that is it keeps us and the engineer at arm's length, and it allows no conflict of interest. It allows us to basically go to a licensed engineer, look at the plans, and then sign off on them. And after that's done, then we end up going, to getting the trailer ordered and then processed. Trailers usually take, on a good season, 2 to 4 weeks. On a bad time, it can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to be built. And then at that point, that's when we go into the ordering process. I'm getting all the, special materials, custom windows and doors usually. All those little fits and finishes that have to get ordered and take a longer lead time, so that in hopes by the time the trailer finishes and we get the notification that it's coming, and because they're only a couple miles away from us, it makes it a lot easier to obtain that trailer. But we got to make sure that we have all that product in here on time as well. And that's a trick right now with COVID. It's been a real tricky situation trying to get all that product here with all the delays that we see. And then it goes into the build process. So long or short of it, you're looking at anywhere from, I tell people, 120 to 180 days on average is a custom build.
Cool. And something I was going to talk to you about in terms of that as well is with regards to COVID and sort of people having to be quarantined, stuck at home and learning the sort of things are changing and more working from home. Do you think that there's going to be an increase in the interest and the sort of people looking to purchase tiny homes over the next few months, years? Do you think it's changed people's perception about them, everything?
I think it's changed definitely.
Yeah.
When the market had what it had happened to it in 08 to 012, and it was really by the financial market collapse, it affected worldwide, but it only affected a percentage of people. It didn't affect everybody, and the difference is COVID has affected everyone. COVID has affected every generation, every business type, every country, you name it. And so for us, we have to do a lot of things here within the business. We spent tens of thousands of dollars having to redo our entire floor. We had to set our individual stations up so our guys are protected. We can only, with the social distancing, have basically 4 guys working on a tiny home at any one time, whether it's on the outside or inside, because the close proximities. And it's tough because even when you try, they still cross. People are going to get close to each other. There's no way around it. It's one of those things that I have a full-time cleaner on staff that every hour they're out there and they're sanitizing. And I am thankful to say none of us have gotten it. Nobody on our team. And we've had as high as 32 people here at any one time working. So if it was going to happen, it could happen here very easily. But we've taken all the measures. It's just what's happened with that is it's left a huge slowdown And so what would take us a day now is taking us 2 or 2.5 days to do something.
Yeah.
And I didn't pass that on to any of the customers. We took a huge beating in May and June on the current customer role, because I wasn't going to go back and tell customers, sorry, COVID hit, and now I have to increase your pricing because of other people's actions or because of distribution or whatever. And that's something I take pride in, although it's not hugely recognized, but it's something that's big, because almost any company could do modifications to contracts for that reason. And I've tried to honor every single aspect of all of the contracts that we had. And that was 27 contracts. So it's a significant number. But I didn't want those customers affected any more than they already had been. As far as
that is respectable.
Yeah. And as far as the ordering goes, I think that people are realizing that maybe having a big property or a big house or whatever, it might not need to be what they are thinking it needs to be. So ultimately, it's one of those things that is more about, hey, what does my life look like now that I have my kids at home, now that I'm doing, learning over the internet, and I'm doing all of these things that I'm adapting to my life, and now I'm working from home. Do I need a 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 square foot home? Do I need to spend $3,000 to $15,000 a month in overhead? An average trailer financed $500 to $1,000 a month. So you can't even get in Portland a 1-bedroom for anywhere near that. You can get basically a co-op, a shared housing for $1,000, and it's not going to be very nice. So I think people are seeing that there's a lot of facets. I'm seeing the rental market, Airbnb. I'm seeing people opening businesses. And then the biggest thing is brick and mortar. People are realizing that they don't need their business in a brick and mortar. They can take their business on the road and make it mobile. And that's where we really specialize in, is because I have the commercial market and the understanding of the commercial market down very, very well. And that's why big names out there have trusted me, because they know that I know I'm going to always do the right thing for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that is a big thing, sort of the whole working from home, having your children at home, everything like this. It's sort of teaching people, maybe, like you say, maybe you don't need all of this space. Maybe you don't need to sort of be spending all this money heating a house, doing this, doing that, when in reality, as long as you've sort of got your phone and your laptop, you can have your work from home, you can sort of do everything mobile. And I think it is going to sort of lead to a change in perspective and sort of lead to more people looking to move tiny and to explore to alternative lifestyles, I guess, which will obviously be really good for all of us in the sort of tiny house industry.
Sure.
Yeah, and so now we've obviously had a chat about everything that goes on behind the scenes, the back end of the business, all that sort of stuff. So sort of now going in the direction of sort of once the tiny house is finished and sort of looking at a finished product, there's some questions that I have here about that. So I was going to ask sort of about the biggest and the smallest tiny homes that you've built, and sort of what's been the difference in the production from the biggest house and the smallest house.
Smallest house I've ever built myself, 12 feet. 16 feet was the smallest completed house. 12 feet was partially incomplete. And then the largest we've ever done was 44 feet. And that was a gooseneck. Legally, that's like the largest you can do. And that was for a client on a quad axle. That's 4 axles, 28,000 pounds. It was a monster. It was a beast.
That is seriously big. Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest thing is not being overwhelmed. I came from luxury home building, so I built homes at 5,000, 6,000 square foot previous.
Yeah.
I know the building side of the business very well, and it's just a larger order of process. That's really what it comes down to, and it's just more attention to detail. Larger build, you have more room to make more errors and mistakes. There's a lot of square footage and real estate that covers on that build.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the finished product was one and the same, and it doesn't matter if it's as small as 12 feet or 16 feet or as big as 44 feet. It's just a matter of the process in the build. And that's where I have to spend every day a part of my time on the floor, because I have to go through those homes. I put my eyes on those homes. I touch them. I make sure to see and try to find a lot of those little errors, because, You don't want a warranty on a 44-foot home. It's a lot of home.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And how have the sort of clients that you've had, how have they acclimatized? And obviously, I'd imagine you're in touch with a lot of them still. How have they sort of found the transition from conventional houses, bigger living, to the tiny houses that you sold them?
For the most part, I'd say 90% of them have stepped through it and done it. And now it's an everyday part of their life, and they're happy, and they would probably never change anything about it, other than I've had several of them decide to change their tiny home and get a different one, and we built them a second tiny home. The 10% others, I've had people try it and it's just not for them, and they end up using it as a rental, a vacation home, just a traveler, an RV once in a while, or they sell it. And that's why we have the consignment program. The consignment program was designed for clients that either upgrade or downgrade or get a second unit or a third unit, and they want to sell a unit that we built, that we can basically put it on our website and sell it to them, to the general public. And I basically go through them. I try to recertify them as best as I can. Obviously they're used, but I would say less than 10%, honestly, ever go to that level.
So what would you say would be sort of your main piece of advice for the listeners to take away if they are sort of in the process or at the stage now where they're debating or looking at going tiny, to sort of try and avoid those issues of not acclimatizing or rushing into it? What would be your best advice for them?
My best advice for anybody is know your builder and know who you're working with, regardless of the situation. It has nothing to do with Tiny Heirloom. It has to do with people are professionals in what they do. And as I think people all over the country, not Americans only, all over, they realize you're not going to go buy a car or a vehicle of any kind and there's a manufacturer with no information.
Yeah, you've got to do your research.
You just don't. You don't do that. Yeah. You're going to places like Mercedes, Honda, Kia. It doesn't matter who it is. Rolls-Royce. Doesn't matter who it is. You're going because the brand of what you like, the budget of which is appropriate and what you can afford. And ultimately, you're going because usually it's when you're buying a new car, you're buying a peace of mind, something that's covered under warranty, something that has a reputation. I always tell people you can't buy off of price. You need to buy off of facts. You need to buy off of knowing that your builder is a registered builder. And when I say that, in the States, you need to be a manufacturer and a licensed dealer. You have to have two different licenses and accreditations.
To even start, yeah.
A lot of people don't have their manufacturing license, and it's because the insurance is so expensive. It's $100,000 policy a year cost to me to have my manufacturing license. The reason that is because I'm putting basically a vehicle of sorts on the road. I'm giving it a VIN number. I'm giving it the value behind what we're charging, and it's in the NADA guide. It's the VIN number is our VIN number. It's not the trailer manufacturer that made the flatbed trailer, and people don't realize that. So education is key, because if you don't understand those things and then you buy off of price alone and you say, oh, this builder's $35,000 for a home. Well, why is he $35,000?
Exactly.
Because I can't build it for $35,000, even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And that's where the education comes into play, because you have to understand the whole process of everything from A to Z. And then it's the quality behind it. And then it's also knowing that you have a builder who stands behind their product. I have very rarely declined a warranty, even when it's past the 1-year builder warranty. If it's something that we know that we did wrong and it is absolutely an issue of a defect of what we did, I will take ownership of it even past my standard 1-year builder warranty.
Yeah.
But what I can't do is put out product there. And this is why I tell people product is so important, because people will want some of the most naturals of wood. That's not meant to go on a tiny home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wood swells, wood wicks. Wood absorbs water. And so what happens is even though when it leaves the factory and it has 2 or 3 coats of finish on it and clear or whatever it is, you have to maintain that. People don't get that.
People don't.
So 6 months later, I'll get a call and somebody will say, well, why is my siding starting to buckle? You installed it wrong. No, we put the relief cuts. We have the flashing. It's because you forgot you live in a very treacherous climate. And when you have the end of sun here in summer, and now all of a sudden it's snow and rainfall and all that,
it's completely
you have to make sure that you keep applying and sanding and putting those coats on there. People don't realize that. So I got rid of a lot of the natural wood on the outside because of that reason. Because I knew that if I could make it easier for clients and make it understandable for clients, they would get it, but they would appreciate it, and they wouldn't have to do that. So you have to know the right builder. That builder has to be able to explain all this to you and give you your pros and cons with what you do. For the DIYers, if you're building for yourself because you know you want to build something for a domain, it's your property. You're going to live in it. That's one thing. But if you're going to build it because you need to make an income, then you need the responsibility behind building it, no matter if you're a DIYer or you're a corporation. And that is why you have to have the right insurances, because if you make a mistake and you don't ground your wiring correctly, you're on a metal frame. Well, what does water and metal do and electricity?
Exactly.
Poof. So at the end of the day, you need to know and make sure that you understand what you're doing, because not only are you putting your own life in jeopardy and your loved ones and your family, but if now you're going to rent it, sell it, to me, you don't have the business in doing that unless if you're a manufacturer, because it goes back to the principle of what are you buying? I know that they can't give you a license plate. They can't let you have a registration. And if they do, it's on the trailer. And people don't realize that. You're buying a trailer as a flatbed trailer typically. And that's what people will register with their MVDs or DMVs. It's their motor vehicle departments, essentially, where they get their licensing and their plates and their registrations. They don't realize that basically is zero value now. Because what about the structure? That's what makes a tiny home a travel trailer or an RV, a recreational vehicle. And they only can do that if you have the licensing.
Yeah, exactly. And that is so important, because I mean, there's so many
huge
avenues that we could go down. That's why it's so important. Like we say, just do it properly the first time. It will sort of pay off. So I'd say that is sort of a really good takeaway for those that are listening, to sort of do the research, make sure you know what you're investing in, what you're doing, because it is such a big decision. It's like you wouldn't buy a car, you wouldn't buy even an oven without doing the sort of proper research, that sort of stuff. So shouldn't be looked over at all.
Exactly. That's
another
important.
question I had for you. Yeah, it is definitely. You mentioned earlier that you sort of your initial background in house building was sort of on the larger side, sort of 5,000-6,000 square feet houses. Where did the sort of transition start? What sort of sparked your interest in tiny houses and going to almost the other end of the spectrum, building tiny after building so big?
So I used to be known in Portland for basically doing one-off custom and then renovations. And I would love to take like historics and homes that everybody else would tear down and build a brand new cookie cutter home. I would preserve it and I would add on to it, or I would do extra. The problem with that is a lot of that had lead and abatement issues and health concern. And so you have to know what you're doing very well. And I did. I had my lead-based license. I knew how to handle asbestos correctly and do the things that you needed to do. My last house was done on one of the most historic areas of Portland and Southeast. It was on Reed College Place. Reed College Place is actually home to Steve Jobs, and it's where he went to college. Yeah. Reed College is actually, there's a statue of Steve out there, and he had his house like within a block and a half from where I did this house. Wow. The house that I bought ended up becoming an asbestos and a huge just lead nightmare, to the point of renovating it made no sense. So I took it down, cleared it, and I put a 4,400 square foot retro historic. So when it was done, I had 2 years of hell. I had every neighbor pissed at me and every person out there mad at me. Yeah. But then when it was done, it looked like it was almost 100-year-old home. It was painstaking. It was a lot of work. And I realized then, hey, I can do that. I can have that finish and that fit in the feel that I want to give people. But why not do it tiny? Why not do it in a way that becomes more economical too? Because I've lived in a 8,000 square foot home, and then I've lived in a trailer, a single wide. I was no happier or unhappier in either way. And I realized I don't need all that space. I don't need, to be in 10,000 square feet because I could. I wanted to be somewhere where I was happy and I wasn't just living for a mortgage payment, and I could just be flexible and do what I wanted to do. So it was a combination of all of that. And that was ironically the last house I ever built on the residential side. And it just gave me a rude awakening of take what you know best of the building world and then create something that is so much more repeatable, and I can make money quicker for doing what I love to do. But then I can really fulfill a void for people out there because we started seeing it here in Portland, the housing crisis. There was a shortage.
Exactly.
Portland never let verticals go past 9 stories on the east side of the Willamette River specifically. Now all of a sudden they're given $20 million grants to put 30-story verticals up. And I didn't understand why they were doing it until I realized, oh my God, there's no more land. There's no more inner city availability for people to basically live. And then these same houses 3 years ago when I stopped, so in 2013 and 2014, that I was paying sometimes $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 for, I'm now paying $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. And then I still got to tear it down and build a new house. By the time I'm done, I got to sell this house for $2 million. It became where, as an investor, an investment, it didn't make sense. For $2 million, why don't I go build 20 tiny homes?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that is the difference. Yeah. So what have you sort of seen as the main takeaways from, obviously, the construction or sort of basic processes are the same, but have you sort of taken anything away from building the bigger homes into the tiny homes now? Are there any sort of tips and tricks for making such a small home seem like it's bigger? Is it sort of natural light, light-colored walls, or what would you say is the main sort of
window placement? Window and door placement is key, and knowing where your strengths are. And I am phenomenal when it comes to design, but I let my architect and my engineers really play with the modeling of light and the best usage of it in those types of bigger windows. But you got to be careful because those bigger windows can shatter too. So you got to have the right glass in those windows. Again, know your products and know what your builder needs to know so that you're not going down the highway and shattering an 8-foot window. But to get that volume and that height, it's either a linear line, it's knowing how to run the flooring in the right direction, lighter colors, brighter, that way that it feels more open, lighter tones of wood and composites even, that way that you're not feeling so dark and so caved in. Exactly. And then knowing how to manipulate structure so that you can get different elevations. And what I like about tiny homes is the challenge. And that was one thing that I got bored of with regular houses. There was no challenge there for me anymore. Yeah. Tiny homes, it's such a small footprint. And then you want to take my style is a lot of contemporary. I love modern contemporary looks. So I want to put, those 5-6 foot pop outs and then have those big walls of steel structure and glass. And I'm like, well, how the hell do you do that in a tiny home? And so learning how to use those elevations.
It's about an hour and 15 minutes now. There's so much more I could ask you, so much more I could go on to. But I just wanted to say, obviously, a massive thank you for sort of coming on and talking about your process, talking about your experience and sort of how you go about things. It's been really interesting to get an insight, and I'm sure for the listeners as well to sort of hear that it's not all fun and games. It's not all that you see on Instagram. It is sort of so much going on in the background, so much to learn from. And there'll be sort of links to all the social media, to all of the YouTube, Instagram, merchandise all below. But yeah, just a massive thank you for coming on and sort of being so open and so honest about what you guys do at Tiny Heirloom.
Yep, I appreciate it. And we'll leave it to be continued, and then we'll come back on and do an update.
Exactly, definitely. There's lots more coming in the future.
Yep, absolutely.
Amazing, thank you.
All right, thanks for having us.
To listen to the full episode of the Tiny House Ideas podcast, head to your favourite podcast streaming platform. It's available on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts. And alternatively, if you'd rather watch the full episode as a video, so the full conversation in a video format, that's only available on Patreon.